The wind howled across the barren surface of Kepler 442c like a living thing, carrying with it sheets of ice that could strip flesh from bone in seconds. Marcus Chen pulled his thermal coat tighter around his shoulders as he made his final rounds of the mining station's perimeter. The weather warning had been flashing red on his datapad for the past 6 hours, but someone had to check the outer sensors before the storm hit full force. He was the foreman of Mining Station Alpha 7, a small operation that extracted rare earth minerals from this frozen hellscape of a planet. 43 souls depended on him to keep the lights on and the heat running. The storm approaching was being called the worst in 50 years of planetary monitoring. Even the automated systems were struggling to maintain readings through the interference. Marcus checked his chronometer. Another 20 minutes and he could head back inside where hot coffee and a warm bed waited. The outer perimeter sensors were all green, the emergency beacons were functioning, and the backup power cells were fully charged. Everything was as ready as it could be. That's when he heard it. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on his ears. The howling gale could make all sorts of sounds, from screaming metal to crying children. But this was different. This was organic. This was pain. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks, activating the audio enhancers in his helmet. The crying came again, faint but unmistakable. Something alive was out there in the storm, and it was in trouble. Every piece of training he'd received told him to get back to the station immediately. The storm was minutes away from reaching lethal intensity. Whatever was out there would have to wait until after it passed. But Marcus had always been the kind of man who couldn't walk away from something in pain. He activated his emergency beacon and switched his comm to broadcast mode. Alpha 7 Base, this is Marcus. I'm investigating a possible distress signal in Sector 7. Stand by. The voice of Sarah Reeves, his second-in-command, crackled through the static. Marcus, are you insane? The storm's about to hit full force. Get back here now. 2 minutes, Sarah, just 2 minutes. Marcus followed the sound, using his helmet's directional audio to guide him through the swirling snow. The temperature was dropping fast, already at -40 and falling. His breath came out in puffs that froze instantly in the bitter air. The crying grew louder as he approached a cluster of mineral formations that jutted from the ice like ancient monuments. There, in a small depression between two of the larger rocks, he found them. 2 small forms huddled together against the cold, their fur matted with ice and snow. At first glance, Marcus thought they were some kind of local wildlife, perhaps the ice wolves that occasionally wandered near the station. But as he knelt down for a closer look, he realized these creatures were unlike anything in the planetary database. They were roughly the size of Earth dogs, but their proportions were all wrong. Their heads were larger, more intelligent-looking, with forward-facing eyes that held an unmistakably sentient awareness. Their fur was a deep silver blue that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light of the storm. Most striking of all were the small devices attached to their necks, clearly artificial and definitely not of human make. The smaller of the two lifted its head as Marcus approached, fixing him with eyes that held a depth of intelligence that made his breath catch. It tried to cry out again, but the sound was weak and growing weaker. Marcus didn't hesitate. He stripped off his emergency thermal blanket and carefully wrapped it around both creatures, lifting them against his chest. They were surprisingly light, but their body temperature was dangerously low. If he didn't get them somewhere warm soon, they wouldn't survive the next hour. The storm hit just as he reached the station's outer airlock. The wind speed jumped from 40 kilometers per hour to over 100 in the space of seconds, and the temperature plummeted another 15 degrees. Marcus stumbled through the door just as the automated systems engaged the lockdown protocols. Sarah was waiting for him in the decontamination chamber, her face a mask of concern and annoyance. Marcus? What the hell were you thinking? Do you have any idea how close you cut that? The sensors show wind speeds that would have turned you into paste if you'd been out there another minute. Marcus carefully set the wrapped bundle on the examination table, pulling back the thermal blanket to reveal his rescued charges. Sarah's angry expression melted into one of wonder and confusion. "What are they?" she asked, leaning closer to get a better look. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but they were dying out there. Look at these collars or whatever they are. This is definitely alien technology." The devices around the creatures' necks were small and elegant, made from some kind of metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were no visible controls or displays, just smooth surfaces covered in what looked like decorative etchings. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief medical officer and xenobiologist, arrived within minutes of being called. She took one look at the two creatures and immediately began setting up a makeshift treatment area in the medical bay. "Their core temperature is 23 degrees below normal for creatures this size," she reported as she worked. "They're in severe hypothermic shock. I'm starting warming protocols now, but I'll need to be careful. Too fast, and we could trigger cardiac arrest." Marcus watched as Elena worked with practiced efficiency, setting up heating blankets and intravenous fluid warmers. The two creatures remained unconscious, their breathing shallow but steady. "Have you run them through the xenobiology database?" Marcus asked. Elena nodded, her expression troubled. "Nothing even close. The bone structure is unlike anything I've seen. The cranial capacity suggests intelligence well beyond typical animal cognition, and these devices—" She gestured at the collar-like objects. "The metal is something I can't identify. It's not responding to any of our standard scans." Over the next several hours, as the storm raged outside with unprecedented fury, Marcus found himself returning to the medical bay again and again. Something about the two creatures drew him in ways he couldn't explain. When they finally began to stir, it was his voice they responded to first. The smaller one, which Elena had determined was slightly younger than its companion, opened its eyes and looked directly at Marcus. The intelligence in that gaze was unmistakable and unsettling. It wasn't the look of an animal recognizing a human. It was the look of one sentient being recognizing another. Marcus reached out slowly, letting the creature sniff his hand before gently stroking the soft fur behind its ears. The response was immediate and surprising. The creature began to make a sound, not quite a purr but something similar, and pressed its head into Marcus's palm. "They're definitely intelligent," Elena observed, making notes on her data pad. "Look at the way they're studying us." "That's not instinct. That's analysis." The larger of the two creatures, apparently the older sibling, was more cautious. It watched Marcus with wary but not hostile eyes, clearly protective of its smaller companion but not aggressive toward their rescuers. As the hours passed and the creatures grew stronger, their personalities began to emerge. The smaller one, which Marcus had started calling Silver due to its particularly lustrous coat, was curious and playful. It seemed fascinated by human technology, watching with obvious interest as Elena operated her medical equipment. The larger one, who Marcus dubbed Storm in honor of the weather that had brought them together, was more reserved and dignified. It carried itself with a bearing that suggested nobility or high rank within whatever society it came from. By the time the storm began to subside, 18 hours later, both creatures were fully recovered and beginning to explore their new environment. They moved with a grace that was almost supernatural, their paws making no sound on the metal floors of the station. "We need to figure out where they came from," Sarah said during the daily briefing. "Those devices they're wearing suggest they belong to someone with technology we've never seen before." Marcus nodded, though privately he was already dreading the thought of giving up his unexpected charges. In less than a day, they had become more than just rescued animals. They had become companions in a way that defied easy explanation. The answer to their origins came sooner than expected. Marcus was in his quarters, writing up the incident report, When Silver approached him with something in its mouth, the young creature dropped the object at his feet and sat back on its haunches, tail wagging in a distinctly dog-like manner. The object was one of the collar devices, apparently removed by Silver itself. Marcus picked it up carefully, noting that it was warm to the touch and seemed to be vibrating slightly. "Elena," he called over the intercom, "you need to see this." Dr. Vasquez arrived within minutes, took one look at the device in Marcus's hands, and immediately began running scans. "It's active," she reported, her voice tight with excitement and concern. "There's some kind of energy signature building inside it. It's like it's charging up or powering on." Before Marcus could respond, the device began to emit a soft, pulsing light. The light grew brighter and more rapid until suddenly a three-dimensional hologram appeared above the device. The image was of a creature similar to Silver and Storm, but clearly adult and bearing elaborate decorative items that suggested high rank or importance. The hologram spoke in a language that sounded like a combination of melodic tones and subtle harmonics. "Are you recording this?" Marcus asked Elena. "Everything," she confirmed, "but I have no idea what it's saying." The hologram continued for several minutes, its tone shifting from what sounded like formal proclamation to something more urgent, almost desperate. When it finally faded, the device in Marcus's hands went dark again. Silver approached him again, this time pressing its head against his leg and looking up at him with eyes that held an almost human expression of gratitude and trust. "Whatever that message was," Marcus said, scratching behind Silver's ears. "I think it was important." He had no idea how important until the next morning, when long-range sensors detected something that would change everything they thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. Sarah burst into the mess hall, where Marcus was having breakfast with his two new companions. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking as she held her data pad. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." The image on her datapad showed the long-range sensor display. Approaching Kepler 442c was the largest fleet of spacecraft anyone had ever seen. The computer was still counting, but the initial estimate was staggering. Nearly 2,000 ships of unknown design and origin were heading directly for their small mining station. Marcus looked down at Silver and Storm, both of whom had gone very still and alert, their ears pricked forward as if they could somehow sense what was coming. "I think," Marcus said quietly, "we're about to meet their family." The first ships appeared at the edge of the sensor grid, exactly 23 hours after Marcus had rescued Silver and Storm from the ice. They didn't approach gradually or cautiously like human vessels might when encountering an unknown installation. They simply materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming against the starfield like obsidian sculptures. Marcus stood in the station's command center, watching the tactical display with growing amazement and not a small amount of fear. Each new sensor sweep revealed more vessels materializing from the void. The computer had stopped trying to maintain an exact count after reaching 1800. But the ships kept coming. "Sir," reported Jenny Walsh from the communications console, "we're receiving broad-spectrum transmissions from the fleet. Multiple frequencies, multiple languages. The computer is trying to establish translation protocols, but it's going to take time." "How much time?" Marcus asked, never taking his eyes off the display. "Hours at least, maybe days. These linguistic patterns are completely outside our database." Sarah moved to stand beside Marcus, her face grim. "Our entire planetary defense grid consists of 3 automated missile platforms and a handful of mining lasers. Even if every human ship in this sector responded to a distress call, we'd be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Marcus nodded absently, then looked down at Silver and Storm, who had refused to leave his side since the long-range sensors had first detected the approaching fleet. Both creatures were alert, but not agitated. If anything, they seemed expectant. "They know what's coming," he said suddenly. "Sir?" Sarah asked. "Silver and Storm. Look at them. They're not afraid. They're waiting for something." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her mobile analysis station. "I've been monitoring their vital signs. Heart rate is elevated but steady, not consistent with fear response. It's more like anticipation." Before anyone could respond, the communications console erupted in activity. Jenny's fingers flew over her controls as she tried to keep up with the incoming data streams. "I'm getting cleaner signals now," she reported. "The computer's making progress on the translation matrix. It looks like... Wait, sir, I think they're trying to establish a direct communication link with us specifically. Can you put it through?" "Working on it. The signal strength suggests the transmission is coming from the largest vessel in the fleet. And Marcus, that ship is enormous. Our sensors are reading it as over 8 kilometers long." The main display flickered and went dark for a moment before resolving into the clearest alien hologram any human had ever seen. The figure that appeared was clearly of the same species as Silver and Storm, but adult and bearing elaborate markings and decorations that spoke of high authority. The alien's appearance was striking. Standing roughly 7 feet tall with the same silver-blue fur as the rescued pups, but marked with intricate patterns of darker blue and black. The creature wore what appeared to be formal robes, and around its neck was an ornate version of the devices Silver and Storm had been wearing. When the alien spoke, the words came through the translation system with a slight delay, rendered in a voice that managed to convey both power and careful restraint. "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. I am Pack Leader Kalen of the Corellian Starfleet. We come seeking 2 of our young who were lost in your system during a navigation training exercise. Their emergency beacons indicate they are present on your installation." Marcus felt his heart sink. Of course. He'd known from the moment he saw the fleet that this moment would come. Silver and Storm weren't strays or refugees. They were someone's children, and that someone had come to collect them with what appeared to be the largest military force in known space. "I'll respond," Marcus told Jenny, stepping forward toward the hologram. "This is Marcus Chen, foreman of Mining Station Alpha 7. The 2 young ones you seek are here and safe. They were caught in a severe ice storm, and we provided medical assistance." The alien's reaction was immediate and profound. The formal military bearings seemed to crack slightly, revealing something more personal underneath. "You rescued them from the storm?" Kalen asked, and the translation system seemed to struggle with the emotional undertones in the alien's voice. "Yes. They were suffering from severe hypothermia. Our medical officer treated them, and they've made a full recovery." What happened next was entirely unexpected. The proud, imposing figure on the hologram seemed to deflate slightly, and when Kalen spoke again, there was something almost like vulnerability in the translated words. May I see them?" Marcus gestured to Silver and Storm, who had been sitting patiently at his feet throughout the exchange. As soon as they saw the hologram, both creatures came to immediate attention, their postures shifting into what was clearly a formal stance. Silver let out a series of melodic calls that the translation system rendered as something like, "Honor, Father! We live! We are well." Storm's response was more subdued but equally formal. "Pack Leader, this human preserved our lives when death was certain." The change in Kalen was remarkable. The formal mask slipped entirely, replaced by an expression of overwhelming relief and something that looked very much like parental love. "My children," Kalen said, and the simple words carried such weight of emotion that Marcus felt his throat tighten in response. "We have searched for 7 rotations without rest. When your distress signal went silent, we feared the worst." Silver bounced excitedly, apparently forgetting protocol in the presence of what Marcus was beginning to understand was probably a parent or close relative. "Honor, Father, The human Marcus saved us from the ice death. He shared his heat and healing. Storm was hurt. But the human healers made him strong again. Marcus saw Kalen's attention shift fully to him for the first time, and the weight of that alien gaze was considerable. "Marcus Chen of the third planet," Kalen said formally, "you have preserved the lives of 2 members of the royal pack. In doing so, you have earned the eternal gratitude of the Karelian Star Empire and all our allied worlds." "Royal pack?" Marcus managed, his voice somewhat strangled. Silver let out what sounded like a giggle. "Did you not know, Marcus? Storm is third-born to the Emperor himself. I am Storm's chosen pack sibling bound by the ancient laws." The command center fell completely silent, except for the soft humming of electronic systems. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as the full implications hit him. "I rescued alien royalty," he said faintly. "Indeed," Kalen confirmed, and now there was what sounded like amusement in the translated voice. "You rescued the Emperor's son and his bonded companion. In our culture, such an act creates bonds that transcend species and time itself." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her shock. "Pack Leader Kalen, if I may ask, what exactly does this mean for future human-Karelian relations?" Kalen's expression became thoughtful. "Dr. Vasquez, is it? Your species has no knowledge of the Karelian Code of Honor, so allow me to explain. When one preserves the life of a royal pack member, particularly at personal risk, they become what we call pack friend. It is a bond that extends not just to the individual, but to their entire species." "What does that entail exactly?" Sarah asked. "Protection, alliance, shared knowledge and resources. Marcus Chen, by saving Prince Storm and Pack Sister Silver, has elevated your entire species to protected status under Karelian law. No member of our empire or our allied worlds may bring harm to any human without facing the full wrath of our fleets." Marcus sat down heavily in his command chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had apparently just happened. "I just wanted to get them out of the cold." Storm padded over to Marcus and pressed his head against the human's hand. When the young alien spoke, his translated words carried a weight of sincerity that transcended the mechanical nature of the translation. "Marcus, pack friend, you acted without knowledge of our status or importance. You saw only 2 young ones in need and chose to risk danger to preserve life. This is the highest virtue recognized by our people. You honor not just yourself, but your entire species with such actions." Kalen nodded approvingly. "Well spoken, my son. Marcus Chen, I formally request permission to land a small diplomatic vessel at your installation. There are ceremonies that must be performed, agreements that must be formalized. Your species stands now at the threshold of joining the greater galactic community, and much preparation will be required." "Ceremonies?" Marcus asked weakly. Silver bounded over to him, tail wagging in excitement. "Oh yes, Marcus, there will be the bonding ceremony, where you're formally recognized as pack friend, and the species elevation ritual, where your entire race is granted protected status, and the technology sharing accords, where we teach you about hyperspace travel and energy manipulation and gravity control and—" "Silver," Storm interrupted gently. "Perhaps we should not overwhelm our pack friend with too many details at once." Marcus looked around the command center at his crew, all of whom appeared to be in various states of shock and disbelief. Sarah, in particular, looked like she was struggling to process what she'd just heard. "Technology sharing?" she managed. Kalen's expression was solemn but pleased. "The Karelian Empire has existed for over 50,000 years, Dr. Reeves. We have explored distant galaxies, unlocked the fundamental forces of creation, and built civilizations that span star clusters. This knowledge is now available to humanity as part of your elevation to pack friend status." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "What kind of knowledge are we talking about?" "Faster than light travel without the limitations of your current hyperspace technology. Energy sources that could power entire star systems. Medical techniques that can extend lifespans by centuries. Terraforming technologies that could transform any planet into a garden world within years rather than decades." The silence in the command center was profound. Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down on him. 24 hours ago, he'd been a simple mining foreman. Now, apparently, he was the human who had accidentally triggered first contact with a galactic superpower. "Pack Leader Kalen," he said finally, "I need to contact my superiors. The Colonial Authority, Earth Central Government. They need to know what's happening here." "Of course," Kalen agreed. "But Marcus Chen, understand this. In the eyes of the Chiralian Empire, you are the first pack friend of your species. You speak with the authority of one who has earned the highest honor we can bestow. Your voice carries the weight of imperial decree." Silver jumped onto Marcus's lap, apparently forgetting all about royal dignity in her excitement. "Marcus, you're going to love the ship tours. We have vessels that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and the food synthesizers can create any flavor combination imaginable, and the recreational gravity fields where you can fly like a bird." Storm approached more sedately, but his eyes held the same excitement as his pack sister. "Pack friend Marcus, there is much you must learn about galactic society. Many species, many worlds, many wonders beyond human imagination. As our pack friend, you will be welcomed on any world in the known galaxy." Marcus gently stroked Silver's fur while processing the enormity of what was happening. "And all of this because I couldn't walk away from 2 freezing kids in a storm?" "All of this," Kalen confirmed, "because you chose compassion over safety, kindness over self-preservation. These are the qualities the Chiralian Empire values above all others. Your species has proven itself worthy of our friendship." Jenny looked up from her communications console. "Sir, I'm receiving transmission requests from Earth Central, Colonial Command, and about 15 different news networks. Word is spreading fast about the fleet." Marcus nodded, knowing that his quiet life as a mining foreman was about to become considerably more complicated. "Pack Leader Kalen," he said, "I accept your request to land a diplomatic vessel, but I have to ask, what happens now?" Kalen's expression was warm and approving. "Now, Marcus Chen, we begin the process of introducing humanity to wonders beyond your wildest dreams. Your species is about to take its first steps into a larger universe, and you will guide them on that journey." Silver looked up at Marcus with bright, intelligent eyes. "Don't worry, Marcus. We'll help you. That's what Pack Family does." As Marcus looked at the young alien in his lap, then up at the massive fleet filling the space around their small station, he realized that everything was about to change. Not just for him, not just for the 43 souls under his protection, but for all of humanity. And it all started with 2 frightened youngsters in an ice storm, and a man who couldn't walk away from something in pain. 3 months after first contact, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the Chiralian flagship Star Whisper, watching as the last of the human diplomatic vessels departed from what was now being called the Kepler Conference. Behind him, Silver and Storm were engaged in an animated conversation with Dr. Vasquez about something called quantum biological synthesis, which Marcus had stopped trying to understand weeks ago. The transformation had been swift and overwhelming. Within days of Kalen's arrival at Mining Station Alpha 7, Earth had dispatched its most senior diplomats, scientists, and military officials to witness what was being hailed as the most significant event in human history. The media had dubbed Marcus the man who changed everything, a title that made him profoundly uncomfortable. But it was the private moments that had affected him most deeply, like the pack bonding ceremony, where he had been formally adopted into the royal pack through rituals that were older than human civilization. The ceremony had been beautiful and strange, involving harmonious songs that seemed to resonate in frequencies human ears weren't designed to hear, and the sharing of what Kalen called life scent, a complex chemical exchange that marked Marcus as family in ways that went beyond mere political alliance. "You look troubled, pack friend," Kalen said, approaching from behind with the silent grace that all Corellians seemed to possess. Marcus turned, offering a small smile to the alien who had become something between a friend and a mentor over the past months. "Not troubled exactly, just overwhelmed, I guess. A year ago, I was worried about mining quotas and equipment maintenance schedules. Now I'm supposedly the human ambassador to a galactic empire that spans 3,000 star systems." Supposedly? Kalen's ears twitched in what Marcus had learned was amusement. "Marcus, you underestimate your importance. The Galactic Council has been watching humanity for decades, waiting to see if your species would develop the wisdom necessary for integration into the broader community. Your actions with Silver and Storm provided the proof they needed." "What kind of proof?" "That humans are capable of putting compassion before self-interest, even when facing personal danger. That you see the value of life regardless of its form or origin. These are not common traits among spacefaring species, Marcus. Many races that achieve interstellar capability do so through aggression and exploitation. Very few develop it through cooperation and empathy." Silver bounded over to them, her adolescent enthusiasm undimmed by months of formal training in diplomatic protocol. She had grown considerably since her rescue, now standing nearly 4 feet tall, but she still retained the playful energy that had first endeared her to Marcus. "Marcus, Dr. Vasquez says that human neural pathways are incredibly adaptable, much more so than we initially thought. She thinks humans might be able to interface directly with our quantum computers once the proper neural bridges are developed." "That's fascinating, Silver, but please remember what we discussed about overwhelming our pack friend with technical details," Storm interjected, approaching with his characteristic dignity. He too had grown, now nearly as tall as his pack sister, but carrying himself with the bearing of someone born to leadership. Marcus chuckled, ruffling Silver's fur affectionately. "It's okay, Storm. I'm starting to get used to having my entire understanding of reality restructured on a daily basis." The truth was, the past 3 months had been the most extraordinary of his life. The Corellians had been true to their word about technology sharing. Human ships were already being retrofitted with Corellian hyperspace drives that could cross the galaxy in weeks rather than years. Medical nanobots that could repair almost any injury or disease were being mass-produced in orbital factories that had been built in a matter of days using Corellian construction techniques. The energy crisis that had plagued humanity for centuries was now a thing of the past, solved by power cells no larger than a briefcase that could provide clean energy for entire cities. Agricultural systems based on Corellian biotechnology were already producing food yields that would eliminate hunger within a generation. But perhaps most remarkably, the changes hadn't led to the social upheaval many had feared. The Corellian concept of gentle integration meant that new technologies were introduced gradually, with careful attention to their impact on human society. Marcus had played a key role in this process, serving as a cultural bridge between species. "Pack friend," Kalen said seriously, "there is something we must discuss. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council has formally requested your presence at the next session." "Another ceremony?" Marcus asked with good-natured resignation. "In a sense. The Council wishes to formally recognize humanity's elevation to Tier 1 status among galactic civilizations. But more than that, they want to meet the human whose simple act of kindness has had such far-reaching consequences." Storm moved to stand beside Marcus, his young face serious. "It is a great honor, pack friend. Only 12 species in the known galaxy hold Tier 1 status. Most civilizations never progress beyond Tier 3, even after millennia of development. What does Tier 1 status mean, exactly? Marcus asked. Full voting rights in the Galactic Council, Kalen explained. Access to the protected worlds, planets set aside for pure research and development, participation in the deep exploration projects that push into unknown galaxies, and perhaps most importantly, the right to sponsor other developing species for integration into galactic society. Silver's eyes lit up with excitement. Oh, Marcus, this means humans can help other species the way we helped you. There are so many worlds where young civilizations are struggling with problems that human creativity could solve. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Humanity had gone from being the species that needed help to one that could offer it to others, all because he'd been unable to walk away from two frightened children in a storm. There's something else, Kalen continued. The Kiralian Emperor himself wishes to meet you. He has decided to make an unprecedented journey to attend the Grand Assembly, specifically to honor the human who saved his son. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Emperor? As in, Silver and Storm's grandfather, Storm supplied helpfully. Emperor Thanes the Wise, ruler of the Kiralian Star Empire, guardian of the ancient ways, keeper of the Storm, Silver interrupted. You're doing the full formal title. We'll be here all day. Dr. Vasquez approached their group, her arms full of data pads and her expression one of barely contained excitement. Marcus, I've just finished reviewing the biological data the Kiralians provided about the species we'll be encountering at the Grand Assembly. There are races that exist as living energy, others that are essentially sentient machines, and some that experience time in completely non-linear ways. From an anthropological standpoint, this is incredible. Marcus nodded, though privately he wondered how he was supposed to make diplomatic conversation with a being made of living energy. The past months had taught him that adaptation was key, but there were limits to how far his small-town mining background had prepared him for galactic politics. Dr. Vasquez raises an important point, Kalen said. The Grand Assembly can be overwhelming even for experienced diplomats. Marcus, as your Pack Alpha, I want to ensure you're properly prepared. Pack Alpha? Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. Did we not explain? Silver asked, tilting her head in confusion. When you became Pack Friend to the Royal Pack, Kalen became your Pack Alpha. It means he's responsible for your well-being and training in all Pack-related matters, which apparently now include intergalactic diplomacy, Marcus said dryly. Indeed, Kalen agreed with what Marcus had learned to recognize as Kiralian humor. Though I must say, you've adapted remarkably well. Your suggestions during the integration planning sessions have been particularly insightful. That was true. Marcus had found that his background in managing diverse mining crews and solving practical problems translated surprisingly well to diplomatic situations. When the Altarian trade delegation had gotten into a territorial dispute with the Centauri representatives, it was Marcus who suggested they focus on shared resource management principles rather than historical grievances. Marcus, Storm said quietly, moving closer to his pack friend. May I speak personally for a moment? Of course, Storm. You never need permission for that. The young Kiralian's expression grew thoughtful. When Silver and I were lost in the ice, facing death, I had accepted that our lives would end far from our pack. In our culture, this is considered a tragedy beyond measure. To die alone, without the comfort of family bond song. But you changed that. You risked your own life to ensure we would not face death alone. Silver nodded earnestly. Even though we were strangers to you, completely alien, you treated us as if we were your own pack young. That level of instinctive compassion is rare in the galaxy, Marcus. It's why the other species are so eager to work with humanity. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Over the months, Silver and Storm had become far more than diplomatic charges or alien allies. They had become, in every way that mattered, family. "You know," he said, "when I carried you both back to the station that night, I never imagined it would lead to all this. I just saw two kids who needed help." "And that," Kalen said with deep approval, "is exactly why you were chosen by fate for this role. A person who saves lives without thought of reward or recognition is exactly the kind of individual who should represent their species to the galaxy." A soft chime sounded through the ship's communication system, and Jenny Walsh's voice came through the speakers. She had accepted a position as Marcus's diplomatic aide, finding the challenge of interspecies communication irresistible. "Marcus, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Central. The President wants to speak with you before the Grand Assembly delegation departs." Marcus sighed. Politics never end, do they? Even on a galactic scale. "Actually," Kalen said thoughtfully, "that reminds me of something the Emperor asked me to discuss with you. He's been studying human cultural patterns and is particularly interested in your concept of democracy. The idea that leadership is chosen by the consensus of the population rather than hereditary succession is fascinating to him." "Is he thinking of political reform in the Empire?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Perhaps. The Emperor is known for his willingness to adapt successful concepts from other cultures. Your rescue of Storm and Silver has given him a very positive impression of human values and decision-making processes." Silver suddenly perked up, her ears swiveling toward the corridor. "Speaking of the Emperor, I believe our escort is arriving. His advance guard likes to make quite an entrance." As if summoned by her words, the ship's proximity alarms began sounding. Not the harsh warnings that indicated danger, but the melodic tones that announced the arrival of Imperial vessels. Through the observation windows, Marcus watched in awe as ships that defied all conventional understanding of physics began materializing around them. They weren't emerging from hyperspace in the usual manner. They were simply appearing as if reality itself was being rewritten to accommodate them. "Dimensional phase technology," Storm explained casually. "The Imperial Guard operates from a parallel dimensional space, much more secure than traditional travel methods." "Right," Marcus said faintly. "Parallel dimensions." Of course. The lead vessel was unlike anything Marcus had seen before, even after months of exposure to Corellian technology. It seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal that pulsed with internal light, and it moved through space without any visible propulsion system. "The Emperor's personal ship, Eternal Dawn," Kalen said with obvious respect. "It's older than human civilization and has been the Imperial flagship for over 30,000 years. A new voice came through the communication system, speaking in the melodic tones of the Corellian language before the translation system kicked in. "Pac Alpha Kalen, this is Imperial Guard Commander Thane. His Imperial Majesty requests permission to come aboard at your earliest convenience. He is eager to meet the human pack friend who preserved the life of Prince Storm." Kalen's ears flicked forward in surprise. "The Emperor wants to board our ship? Usually diplomatic meetings take place aboard the Imperial flagship. His Majesty indicated he wishes to meet pack friend Marcus in familiar surroundings where the human will be most comfortable," the Imperial Guard commander replied. "He believes this will facilitate better understanding between species." Marcus felt a moment of panic. "Kalen, I don't know the proper protocols for meeting an emperor. What if I accidentally insult him or break some ancient taboo?" Silver bounded over and pressed herself against his leg in a gesture of support. "Don't worry, Marcus. Grandfather is very understanding. He knows you're not familiar with Imperial customs. Besides, you've already earned his eternal gratitude. There's literally nothing you could do that would offend him." "The Emperor has requested an informal meeting," Kalen added. "No ceremonial dress, no formal protocols. He simply wants to have a conversation with the human who saved his family." As Marcus prepared to meet the ruler of a galactic empire, He found himself thinking about that night 3 months ago when he'd heard crying in the storm. If someone had told him then that his decision to investigate would lead to humanity joining a galactic community of thousands of species, he would have recommended they seek immediate medical attention. But as he looked around at his friends, human and alien alike, as he thought about the wonders humanity was about to explore and the lives they might be able to save on other worlds, Marcus realized he wouldn't change a thing. Sometimes the most important decisions in history were made by people who simply couldn't walk away from someone in need. And sometimes, Marcus thought as he prepared to greet an emperor, the best thing you could do for the galaxy was just to be human. The soft sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor announced that his greatest adventure was about to begin.